The next piece we're going to look at is the reliquary figure from the Fang peoples of Cameroon. So this is another group from Cameroon, like the Bamileke were, but it's the Fang. And remember that a reliquary is an object that is meant to, some sort of container, some sort of object that is to hold a relic, right? And if we think all the way back to Sainte Foy, and we think about little Faith, right? Little Foy, and a little piece of her, it's not funny, I don't know, I should be laughing, but a little piece of her skull, right, after she was martyred by the Romans, was encased in this gold seated icon that is set up at the Church of Sainte Foy, and that's Romanesque, right, a pilgrimage church. And people come there as part of their pilgrimage, as part of their holy trip, and see the reliquary that's holding the relic, and they would leave an offering. And that's definitely how Christianity kind of functioned as it when it came to holy trips and affirmation of faith in the medieval era. And so here we are in Africa, right? Much later, late 19th to early 20th century, and we still have this idea of relics and a reliquary. So again, a reliquary holds a relic. So this type of reliquary figure is called a Byeri. It's made of wood, and I put the height on there for you, 22 inches high. And so they're a good size, right? Almost 2 feet, but they are also portable. And so it's important to know for our context here that the Fang people have been nomadic people, right? They're not, they weren't a settled people, at least for all of their time. They would move around. And so it needs to be an object that can be picked up, taken with them, and moved to somewhere else. Because it's a reliquary figure, that means it sits on top of a reliquary, right? Container for holding a relic. It sits on top and it guards it, okay? It guards it, it protects it, it empowers the relic. This is a guardian figure. It has bent legs, and if you see right here, kind of looks like he's standing like in a wall sit all the time. So the bent legs show us that this was actually meant to sit on the edge of a container, to sit on that rim of the container, and I'll show you guys a context picture. And has a little like peg at the back to kind of hold it on. And so that's going to sit there, and as you're looking at this object and you're thinking about the form of this object, I really want you thinking about how the audience should interact with or approach this form. And so he should look very solemn or serious to you, right? The closed eyes are going to indicate some sort of spiritual knowing or transcendence, meditation. He's very symmetrical. He's a closed figure, right? In the sense that his arms are tight to his body. And so this is going to be something that is going to not be easily broken. Really, really large belly button, right? And the belly button is, of course, where a child is connected to their mother. And so it's this life source. Obviously, he's a male. His foot's broken off, but other than that, he's in very good condition. You can see he's a dark wood. This is his hair up here, kind of a coiffure. Okay, obviously very stylized. His proportions are not correct in terms of realism. Okay, they're correct according to this culture, but they're not like we would expect with realism. All right, so we're gonna watch this.
We're here in the Brooklyn Museum looking at a wooden sculpture, a figure that performed an important role. It guarded a reliquary.
This figure is almost a talisman in that it was intended to ward off those that might harm the contents of that box.
A guardian
or
figure.
As a warning to others who might come in contact with it and be harmed by it, like uninitiated men and women.
So the contents of the box that this figure guarded were sacred and powerful.
They were usually the bones of important members of society, important ancestors, along with potent substances like beads they may have owned and medicine.
So who constituted a great man for the Fang people?
A very high status, noble person who had lived a long and good life. This would include lineage heads, clan heads, special warriors, even craftsmen who were exceptionally talented, as well as women who had borne lots of healthy children. It's believed that the Fang utilized these reliquary boxes with remains rather than putting them into a more permanent cemetery because they had been nomadic or semi-nomadic. They were
So I want you guys to notice again here with our context picture that the reason that they're not burying in the ground, the reason that they're in these large but portable containers is because they're nomadic. And so they want to be able to take these objects with them. Well, how do you keep someone from walking up and opening up this container of relic, right, of ancestors' bones and belongings? You put a guardian figure on it. So these were supposed to look serious and intimidating to keep people from messing with them.
nomadic. They were probably maintained by elder men in the community who would be in charge of putting them together and consulting them when there was some great decision to be made.
The figure has an elongated torso, a large rounded head, eyes that look down, a closed mouth. The arms are clasped together, but there's a sense of very powerful musculature. So there's a balance between a figure that has a sense of calm and contemplativeness, and at the same time, real power and strength.
It's almost as though the figure has this coiled up energy, this vitality that's ready to spring forth if it was needed, but otherwise retains a very calm, dignified appearance.
The top of the head is enlarged.
For the Fang, we see an emphasis on the head, particularly the coiffure, and the tubular nature of the limbs and the body. There's also an emphasis on the herniated belly button, which is, of course, where the umbilical cord first gives life to humans, just as this reliquary is guarding the remains of the deceased who have returned back into the spiritual world, waiting for rebirth.
So this particular figure is a male figure, but the Fang also made reliquary guardian figures who were female.
These figures also had a second life as puppets during young men's initiations. In other words, they were brought out to educate young men about their ancestors and help young men experience or be in the same place as the essence or the energy of their ancestors, who really were the founding fathers, the lineage heads of their ethnic group. While the face is very typically stylized, the hairstyle was popular when this object was actually made. So we have these three crests and kind of a ducktail in the back, which is what Fang men at the time, high status men, were wearing.
When we look at so much African art, we're looking at art that is not naturalistic, and intentionally so. The purpose of the object was to express certain spiritual ideas. And so we see abstraction, we see eyes that are reduced to half circular shapes, and the cheeks forming these diagonal lines, and a kind of reduction to geometric shapes that art historians call abstraction. And we could also note that in the limbs, which are very cylindrical and rounded.
The artist could have very easily depicted a naturalistic looking figure, but they chose abstraction. This is a conceptual piece. It's about the idea of a reliquary, the idea of this guardian figure, rather than depicting an actual human or how they look in nature, which was not
I know how many of you love conceptual art. Just want to throw that in there.
of interest to this Fang artist. The wonderful tension in this figure is the fact that he is suggesting one approach with honor and respect, with eyes closed and patience. At the same time, he's suggesting his strength to ward off spirits or humans that may want to disrupt the contents of his box.
All right, good stuff there. I think we've talked about all of this, but I threw some of the stuff in a little bit more context One of the interpretations about why the body is kind of more like when we looked at the NDOT, we talked about how that figure is more to an infant's proportion than an adult proportion, and it could have something to do with this um, the continual cyclical nature of life, right? And so we go from a baby to living as, you know, a proportioned adult to dying. And so in the spiritual realm, transcending back to this not yet born or newborn status. And so that could be part of it. And that would also tie into why it's used in, um, you know, coming of age ceremonies. I stole this from somebody, but I thought it was good. It was a broken up kind of function, content. I think we've talked about all these things. They're in your Google slide. And then there's your context picture. All right, only one piece left.